One of our next type of connections that we're going to have to take a look at is going to be Firewire. Firewire is also known as IEEE 1394. This is actually the specific specification that regulates the standard for these cables. Now, our Firewire cables come in two speeds. We have IEEE 1394A and B. These are also known as the 400 version and 800 version because the IEEE 1394A transfers data at 400 megabits per second, and the 1394B version can transfer data at 800 megabits per second. Now, the IEEE 1394A has a typical, the standard is a 6-pin interface. 4 of those pins are data and 2 of the pins are power. It does have another version of its plug that is actually only a 4-pin interface, and this is the 4-pin alternate. Now, this 4-pin alternate only has the 4 data pins. This cable you will see a lot more on camcorders because they don't need those additional 2 pins for power. They just need the 4 pins to actually transfer the data. Our standard connector for our 1394A is going to look similar to this one. For a larger view, we have a connector that looks like this one. So that's going to be one of the examples of our standard connectors. There are a few different types of Firewire connectors, and because as we already talked about, for our standard A, we have our 6-pin and we have 4-pin. And then for IEEE 1394B, that's actually going to be a slightly different interface. It's going to be a 9-pin interface. This 9-pin interface uses what's called a beta port. It's a cable with a keying notch for that IEEE 1394B, and it'll look similar to, say, about this. And when they refer to keying notch, that's our keying notch at the top. That allows for a key to fit in there to make sure that it's the right cable. There's a wider version and there's a narrower version of that keying notch, but we'll go into that in just a second. So our 1394B, again, it connects into what's called the beta port. It's a 9-pin connector. And for our beta port, when we're just communicating with 1394B to another 1394B, we just use what's just a single port here with the wider keying notch at the top, and it communicates across that Firewire cable. Both ends are this same 1394B connector. Now, this is just communicating back and forth with over this one standard. If we actually need to communicate between a 1394B port to a 1394A type device, we use what's called a bilingual cable. That bilingual cable has a narrower keying notch at the end so that we can actually go from, say, this type of connector up to the 1394A type connector. The 1394B connector, we'll see this more on the Mac operating system computers, the Apple computers, Apple devices. It's more common on those to see them on those than see them on other devices. Whereas on our other devices, maybe our camcorders, external hard drives, our standard Intel or Dell computers, we're going to more often see 1394A Firewire type cables. As with our USB, there is a maximum number of devices that we can connect to a single port, because as with USB, we can have hubs that allow us to daisy chain for multiple devices. But the total number of devices that we can have plugged into one port for Firewire is going to be 16. So we want to keep that number in mind. We want to remember the difference between 1394A and 1394B. And now we have our information on Firewire.